Today's episode is sponsored by HelloCoach, a platform dedicated to empowering individuals through personalized coaching experiences that drive clarity, growth, and success. If you want to check out the special offer from HelloCoach today, check out the link in the description box below. Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchtime Series with me, Kim Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me today is leadership and coaching segment. He's a dynamic creative coach, trainer, photographer, and author, often hailed as the Imagineer, dedicated to empowering B2B teams and individuals by harnessing creativity, leadership, interpersonal communication skills, and well-being to foster growth and development. Please welcome to the show, Gary Hirson. Gary, how are you doing?
Well, hi, Kevin. Thanks very much for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm very well. Are you well?
I'm well. Thank you for being here. Thanks for making the time. Gary, so I think before we jump in it, just give us some idea on who you are.
So Kevin, we're living in a time of called hyper disruption, and people are talking about adaptability and reinvention and the likes. And another word is transformation. I like to think as innovation and creativity is just other keywords that are less daunting when you say them and hear them, two words like reinvention and adaptability and hyper disruption. So do work with individuals and teams in areas of innovation, creation or creativity, and B2B is working with business to business or individuals within the team environment for a business to help them identify what it is that they want to innovate or be creative with, and then to do it creatively and innovatively so that the journey is not all about just setting goals and being arduous in the journey of having to achieve the next step and the next step, but actually playing around with what is needed to be done to get to the desired outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is what we're focusing on today is the creativity as a topic. And I think you've touched on it. And I think very often people immediately kind of go that creativity means painting or drawing or being an artist. And that's not necessarily the case. So to start off today, what is it to be creative? Let's start there.
So it's a great question, and it comes up quite a lot. And a lot of people that I've worked with have come in to chat to me and they said, I'm not creative. For that exact reason of which you mentioned, they're not an exhibiting artist, they're not a published author or the likes. But creativity, it's not about that. There are many forms, well, there's many contributing factors to creativity. And the thing about being creative is creativity is about solving a problem. It's about making a connection. It's about being brave enough to try something new. And it is the biggest stumbling block for people wanting to be creative is that it happens outside of our comfort zones. We have to be really brave to be creative, but it is about that. It's an engineer solves a problem. We cook different meals for our kids and we want to maybe put a happy smiley face on a sandwich, which is a creative expression for wanting to have them more enjoyment to what they are eating. So that's the foundations of creativity. It's about solving problems, trying new things, making various connections to connect one, two or three more things.
And if we look at as you say, when we started this conversation, you mentioned the disruption and what the world is going through. Are you finding, especially in the B2B space, in working with teams, are you finding that people actually struggle with creativity? I do some of this kind of work myself, and I very often find that taking people through a bit of a creative process, it usually as a guided, facilitated process, they eventually get there. But off the bat, people are they're so inundated with information, they're so inundated with work that it's almost like creativity is not even in as part of their process.
I agree with you. We're living in a very fast-paced world. The world is speeding up at a rate of knots, which is difficult to comprehend, and it's creating increased levels of anxiousness. But also within a business environment, everything's about productivity, everything's about results, everything's about getting things right. Get it right. We just want it to be right. That looks good on the bottom line. And that's everything that creativity is not. For creativity to happen, we have to be wrong, because that's how we learn things, and innovation comes from being creative. So ultimately, we do need to be okay with the idea that we're going to be wrong. And unfortunately, from our history, even when we were at school, there was one question and there was an answer that was right or it was wrong. And to be creative, we have to flip that on its head. We have to look at the answer and try and we have to assume that there's different routes to get to that answer. So it's a really good question, which I've thought long and hard about. And I don't think people are being less creative. I think we're actually living in a very creative space. It's not always forthcoming, and it's not always promoted within an environment because of the reasons that I've mentioned. But there's a lot of things that are happening at the moment that are really creative, that are actually quite independent from business. To give an example, there was this lady that I met at a market on Sunday who she's selling books. She's a bookseller and she sells everything related to books, but her books were wrapped in a cover. And she said the price is $250, but this is what the book is about. So you don't know what the book says. It's written in Spain. It's historical. It's humorous, and it's related to a woman who does something unusual to her husband. Do you want to buy it or not? And I thought that really amazing. It was like, wow. So there's no back cover. I don't know what I'm going to be getting. It's in line with what I like to read. It's $250. I want to walk away with this book. And you open this book that you don't have any idea of what's happening. And for me, that's absolutely creative. It's like I had to become curious about what is in this book. And that's one of the things I didn't mention about creativity, is that you need to be curious. And just her product was making me feel curious. I want to explore this a little bit further. So there are definitely elements of creativity that are exploding all around us, but they're kind of alternative and not necessarily always in the mainstream.
One of the questions that we have around unpacking this conversation today is the safety requirement needed for creativity to flourish. Speak to us about why do we need a safety requirement and what that is?
First of all, creativity needs boundaries. To give an example, I can say to you, Kevin, I want you to create something for me in 5 minutes. It's like driving into an empty parking lot when you go to a supermarket. You struggle to find a parking because there's so many variables and options available. But if I say to you, Kevin, here's a paper clip and here's a pen. In 5 minutes, I want you to create something for me. I've given you parameters. You've got 2 tools. I've given you a time frame. For that to happen, there's a couple of safety aspects that are needed, and that is we need to feel psychologically safe. This is broken down is we need to feel that we're going to be a space where we're in a non-judgmental environment, and it promotes a feeling of safety. You go into a brainstorming session, and if you're going to be judged by your boss or whoever saying this is a bad idea, you're not going to be open to expressing yourself because you're not feeling psychologically safe. You need to feel safe. You need to be in a safe environment. It has been shown that is hindered in areas of conflict, where extreme poverty, where we're not feeling safe in our mind, both conscious and our subconscious mind is taken up about looking after who we are. So we need to be in a physically safe space. We need to have an empathetic connection. We need to be able to connect with others to collaborate, which is really important. And we need to have freedom to be afraid or eager for the new ventures. We need to have the freedom to feel that we are going to enter into this space where we are not certain of the outcome, but we're physically safe, we're psychologically safe, and we are safe to collaborate with other people. So there are those parameters that do promote the areas of creativity.
Yeah, and as you unpacking it with the psychological and physical safety and with a bout of empathy, it does promote a bit of freedom of thinking. And I have the choice to be able to create something. But now, you also mentioned that there's a connection between creativity and innovation. Speak to us how the creativity sort of guides that, and what is that connection? How are those two connected?
Let's say I have a client who is wanting to go through transformation. And it's interesting. I was listening to your podcast with Hilda the other day. I think it was Hilda, the lady from South America, and she was talking about the identity and the goals in the identity. Think of identity as the innovation. Somebody comes into my space and said, "This is what I want to become." That's the innovation. That is my outcome. And then the question is, okay, how does it look? What does it feel like? But we have an idea of what it is. So that's the innovative part. The creative aspect is, what do we have to do to get there? Okay, and I know you mentioned that you were a little bit adverse to setting goals and the likes, but the creativity comes from, and that's why I like to term it a little bit differently. It's like, what can we play with? What can we try to get us to that space of innovation? And the creative space, as I mentioned previously, is the place where we need to step outside of our comfort zones, where we need to try something with the idea that it might not be right, but we're going to learn from that experience so that we can try something new, which will ultimately lead us to the innovative space. To give you another example, I know Elon Musk is a topic of contention at the moment among many different people. But what he created with the e-vehicle was that he had this idea for the e-vehicle, but the problem was that the battery life there wasn't a battery that had been created with enough life to drive a vehicle for long enough. So the e-vehicle wasn't a new thing. It was there, but they had to be innovative in the energy source to create this vehicle to be drivable. And then they had to be creative in creating this battery. So they're all linked. Innovation comes from creativity. But I do want to mention that some people are more creative, some people are more innovative. And to give an example, some people can see the bigger picture. They know what it is they want to get, but they're not sure of how they're going to get there. And they need to practice maybe on more brainstorming kind of sessions. And then you get people that are very quickly at solving problems and making a connection, but they're not always sure of what they want to do with it. I hope that makes sense in how it's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, rightfully so. That people do get very different sets of people in the world, and how they use information and how they chunk information could be very different as well. So, but I think what stands out for me about that process is an opportunity to not have to be right, and that's definitely what creativity wants to emphasize. And from listening to you, it gives you almost a bit of freedom to kind of just be wrong, even if it might be a good idea, but it just won't work. So having the ability or having a space to be able to be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to a question that you asked me earlier about creativity in the modern world. Because of everything based on bottom lines and productivity and results, people and organizations aren't always they don't allow too much space to be wrong. It's like, we've got to do this. This is the deadline, and we've got to do it now, and it can only cost so much money. Get it right. And that does definitely hinder the creative expression. So we have to be more forthcoming and more comfortable and more easy on the idea that we've got to allow time, space, and finances to be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the questions that you shared with us around creativity and innovation is they both need to be passive and active. How does that play into being more creative and innovative, and what is it being passive and more active?
So there are many. There's a couple of different formulas which I'll chat about. But there was this Professor Heinholz back in the 1800s, and he was a very brilliant guy, and he did a study on what it was to have a creative thought, and he broke it down into various stages. And he says, first of all, you have to put the work into it. So whatever you wanting to create, or whatever you wanting to do, you need to do the work in. And by that I mean you've got to engage with the content, and you've got to study, and you've got to try and work out what it is that you are doing. If it's a new sort of like an engineering process, you've got to read up, you've got to listen to podcasts and do the research. So that's the work part of it. He says, and then what you should do and what you've got to do, you've got to let it percolate. So all of a sudden you've done the work, and it's in our mind, and it's filtering through to our subconscious, and then you let it percolate or incubate, where you actually disconnect from it completely. You move away from it, and that now becomes more of the first stage was the more active stage. The second stage is now it becomes more passive. You walk away from it, and you do something completely different, and you just let it percolate in your mind, in your subconscious mind, while it's all working through the ideas and the research that you've worked with. And then what you do is you do something completely relaxing, and that is you go for a walk, you fly a kite, you go for the beach, you go walk your dog, you go throw a ball with your kid, and that's normally the space where your subconscious mind releases and relaxes so much so that we can access it. And that becomes the illumination stage. And that's also a very passive form of creativity. And then what you do is you do the verification stage. And that is you try what your mind has thrown up at you to see if it works or not. To give you another example, I'm sure it's happened to all of us, is that when you were writing an exam at school, and there was a question that you saw and you knew the answer, but for the life of you, you couldn't think of the answer right then and there. And the more stressed you became, the more anxious you became, the more our subconscious mind actually shuts down, which I'm going to get into, the importance of the subconscious mind. But then the bell goes for the end of the exam, you haven't thought of the answer, and you're on the bus home, or you're walking home, or you're on the bicycle home, and all of a sudden the answer comes to you. And the reason is because all of a sudden we're not actively seeking the answer to this problem anymore. We're now more passive. Our conscious mind has relaxed, and we are now allowing our subconscious mind, which is the supercomputer which resides within us, which has pretty much the coincidences and the answers and the illumination phase of the answers that we're trying to seek, or the creative inspiration that we seek. So that's the active phase, and that's the passive phase. So we have to do the work, but we've also got to be enough, and we've got to be uncontrolling enough to realize that something is going to happen with this information that we've picked up, and allow for that to happen. The challenge is that it's not always the quickest process. That is the problem. For some people, it happens a lot quicker than others. For others, it takes a little bit longer. And besides going for a walk or having a playful experience, is also the art of meditation also does help with finding the illumination phase or the passive phase, because again, that's where accessing our subconscious mind.
And I think that's such a valuable point to recognize. And I think it is the challenge is that for you to integrate information, and for the information that you have uncovered or potentially created, for it to have the time to and so my immediate go-to would be create opportunities where you have more creative engagement, so that you can start unpacking and have a very active process, but allow for the integration to have, and then come back to the processes, so it becomes part of the way you do work, right? And therefore part of how you run processes and come up with innovation in an environment.
Absolutely. You might know this as well, but organizations like Google and Amazon, they allow their workforce 20% of their time at work to do what they want to do. Completely. So they've got to produce the result that they produce in 80% of their time, but 20% they can explore any other interest or hobby that they have. And that's how Gmail came about. And there was one other thing that came about with Google. It was allowing them to do something obviously related to work, but it was completely on their own time for them to explore. Basically, even though it was their own time to do what they wanted, they were still engaged within the environment of work. The ideas were work-related, and then they had this extension of what Google was producing. Besides being the search engine, all of a sudden it became this Gmail provider. So it is really important. And one more point is that the more we're able to focus on something that we want to achieve, the more information that we do pick up. And it's funny how that happens when, and I'm sure it's happened to you, is when you really working on something that you're wanting to create, or a problem that you're wanting to solve, or the likes, and all of a sudden not everything, but a lot of things that you see are related to that. Like you want to buy a new car, and all of a sudden you've seen that car on the road, because all of a sudden our awareness has been focused on that specific result, which is a really good part of the work phase of solving a problem or a creative idea.
Yeah. No, I love that. And even the fact that you mentioned, stress can be impactful for creativity, and it doesn't allow you to think clearly through things, but also the importance of meditation that can help integrate. I think it's a nice awareness to realize that creativity in itself is more of a process than a quick fix to anything.
Absolutely, 100%. And again, it comes back to that activeness and that passiveness. And I think one of the challenges, and it's reiterating of what I said earlier, is that we're quite controlling it, and we're working in a fast-paced environment where, we touch a button and we expect a result now, because that's how fast the world is moving. But creativity it's an amazing process that is really, really, really good for us. For the fact that we're putting in the work. Secondly, that we need to allow ourselves the free time to engage with our well-being, and also to benefit from the results, whether they're right or wrong. Because if it's the right result, we're going to feel absolutely amazing. All the happy hormones are going to be released in our mind. And if it's not the right result, if we're confident enough and brave enough, we can explore that result to see what we can do further with it to get to that desired outcome. So it's almost if you see it like a playful journey or an adventure, all of a sudden it's not this thing that we have to achieve, but it is this thing that we can play with, which is a really important part of the process, which is slightly different thing to what you said about creativity being the process. But if we incorporate the playfulness, it really becomes this fun activity as opposed to this arduous task that has to have a result.
So, I mean, on that point, so how is the act of play, how is that forming, important cog of creativity and innovation?
So there's a couple of examples. First of all, the active play, I just want to, the definition of play is to be able to do something just because we can. Think of a kid. And kids are creative. They're always playing, they're having fun, they're running around. But the interesting thing about children is that they are always asking questions. They'll get a present, they'll get a model or something in a box, and then they'll play with the box. And their questions will be, what can I do with this box? Or how can I make this box more fun? And that's creativity, but they're doing it in a playful manner, where they are just doing something because they can. And children learn from play. They learn that if they fall out of a tree, they're going to hurt themselves. You can tell them, don't climb a tree because they're going to hurt themselves, but they've got to experience it for it to happen. That's a little bit of a negative connotation, but they can create something out of the box just by asking the question and playing with it. Bringing it to the work environment is actually on the increase. What Google did with 20% of their staff's time, just do whatever you want to do. You engage with your hobby. I recently read that airports are now leaving coloring books around and knitting needles for people to just sit to be off screen so that they can engage with playful activities. But to bring it closely to the workforce, let's say you're going to a brainstorming meeting. There are icebreakers and games that you can incorporate within 30 seconds where people are going to be laughing and joking and engaging with others, as opposed to worrying about what their phone is doing. Then what you do is, for a playful environment, you create a set of rules. And the rules, because each game or an active play needs rules. And that is, we are in a safe environment. You are not going to be judged. Whatever you say will or won't be used, but we want you to share ideas. You don't have to share ideas if you don't think you'd have any ideas. And there is absolutely no hierarchy in this environment. So whether there's a CEO, a department head, the janitor, or whatever, everybody is free and equal. Just relax. The time frames are going to be 10 to 15 minutes, and then one of you, instead of standing up and reading through all the different answers of what you've done, we're going to cut up the pieces of paper of the drawings of the answers. We're going to throw them into a hat. We're going to draw them from the hat, and then we're going to vote yes or no. And it's going to be a democratic environment where if you get more than 50% say yes, it's a good idea, then we'll explore that idea further down the line. You can come into this meeting. You don't have to wear a suit and tie. You can just unbutton the top button of your shirt and you can just relax. And to make it even more fun, what we're going to do is we're going to get people from different departments to engage with this brainstorming idea. If it's a marketing innovation that we're looking for, we're going to get somebody from sales, and we're going to get somebody from accounts, and we're going to get somebody from the admin department to throw their ideas into the hat, because we are all unique. We all see the world through different lenses, and the more lenses that we have looking at this challenge, the variety of the answers are going to be at a higher level. And that's just one way of incorporating play within a boardroom environment. There's a game that I've sent through to organizations where you're given a task, and you've got to get somebody you've got to get somebody in your office to fist pump you 3 times in a day. And each person in that team has got a task to do, and they can either know that they're being monitored, or it's kind of a hidden example. And throughout the day, you are just trying to get somebody to fist pump you. And all of a sudden, you're more relaxed at work. It's like, what can I do to Sarah in that admin to get her to fist pump me? And when you do it and you announce it, all of a sudden people realize, okay, so this is what you do, and you're also in on the game, and it just relaxes the environment within the office space. And it can be done over a week, it can be done over half a day, it can be done over a day, but it's just a small little game that creates creative thinking. It creates you getting out of your seat. It creates an environment where you're not sitting at your laptop tapping away at your computer for the whole day.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think, it's an important part of understanding, as you say, play it depends on what the context is and how you approach that. Gary, I love it. And I think it's an important part of as you say, the leaning towards innovation, and how innovation and creativity can sort of feed off each other. If you summarize today's conversation and message, what do you want people to take away from today's conversation? Because I think it's a very important aspect to innovation.
I think, firstly, we're all creative. We're all unique. We have different forms of creativity, some which are strong points and some which are not so strong, but we are all creative. The second thing is that it's fun. We can have fun with creativity, which will lead to innovation. So if whatever transformation we are trying to go through, whether it's as an individual or within a team environment or an organization, is that it doesn't have to be this arduous task. We can put in fun, playful elements that make it more adventure, as opposed to, as I mentioned before, this task, this objective that has to be reached. The third thing is that it can be scary. We have to step out of our comfort zone. If nothing changes, everything stays the same. I've always said that if we go through the same habits and the same routines, we're going to get to the same outcomes. And that can be a little bit stressful. And we need to be, especially within a team environment, some of us are braver than others. We need to be empathetic to each team member, knowing that they're not exactly the same as us, that even though they want to be part of the game, let's call it a game, is that they might deal with the processes slightly different, and some might be a little bit more sensitive, some might be a little bit more fearful. We need to be empathetic to realizing that we're not all the same, and we need to be cognizant and empathetic towards them and help them along the way, and we can be open to being helped along the way. And the third thing is to know that it's an active and a passive process. It's like we're going to put in the work, but be okay with the idea that we're not going to know everything all of the time, but hopefully it'll come to us. And if we're collaborating with coaches, team members, partners, it does help the process. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we should see it as fun. I think that's one of the main
having fun, having some playtime in your business setting. I love it. Gary, if anybody wants to get hold of you, what is the quickest way? Where do we find you, and where do we go for that?
My email, gary@garyhirson.com, HIRSON.com. My website, garyhirson.com.
Fantastic.
Any social media handle, any one of my social media handles have got Gary Hirson in it. It's pretty easy.
Fantastic. Yes, we will put all those all the info in our description boxes below. Today's episode is sponsored by HelloCoach, a platform dedicated to empowered individuals through personalized coaching experiences that drive clarity, growth, and success. If you want to check it out, I have a special offer that's only available on my website, guys. So go and click in the description boxes below. You can get yourself a discount on one of your coaching sessions. Gary, thank you so much. Please remember to like and share and tune into Lunchtime Series, guys. Thank you for joining us from every Wednesday and Thursday on the Lunchtime Series for myself and Gary. Gary, thank you for spending some time with me. And thank you for unpacking some creativity.